In the divorce courtroom, my wife sat across from me. In front of the judge, she looked at me like I was a stranger and said, "You are nothing but a useless old man. If you disappeared tomorrow, the company would still run perfectly. Replacing you would be easier than changing a light bulb." The room went completely silent. 35 years of marriage. 35 years building that empire from nothing. I thought I had lost everything. Then a man suddenly stood up from the witness row, the very man she had hidden from me for years. "I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me where in the world are you watching from. Your city, your country. I want to know who's in this room with me." A quick note. This story contains fictional elements woven in for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or places is coincidental, but everything this story stands for is worth carrying with you. I never imagined I would end up here, 65 years old, sitting in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and floor wax, watching the woman I had loved for 35 years refuse to look at me. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly. Somewhere behind me, a door clicked shut. And Margaret Callahan, the woman who once told me she believed in me more than she believed in anything else in this world, sat across the aisle like a stranger. She wore a navy blazer I had never seen before. Her hair was pinned back the way she wore it for important meetings. Beside her, Catherine Moore, her attorney, was whispering something into her ear. Maggie nodded once, slowly, the corner of her mouth lifting into the smallest smile. That smile. Lord, that smile turned my stomach. James Hartwell leaned close to me. He was a trim man in his early 50s, silver at the temples, with the kind of calm that only comes from spending decades in rooms exactly like this one. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "I've been better," I said. He gave me a single nod, then turned back to the papers spread across the table in front of him. I appreciated that about James. He never pushed. He just listened, and then he worked. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs to keep my hands from shaking. My eyes drifted around the room, the Tennessee state seal mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench, the stenographer already positioned at her machine, the rows of empty gallery seats behind us. It was early. Most of the world was still drinking its first cup of coffee, but I had been awake since 4 in the morning. I had been awake because 3 weeks before this morning, on a cold Friday night in February, something happened at the Omni Nashville Hotel that I could not stop replaying in my head. No matter how many times I tried to push it away, it came back. Always the same, always sharp. The annual charity gala for Callahan Properties. 35 years. That was what the event was celebrating. 35 years since I had walked away from a stable engineering career that mortgaged everything I had and built a commercial real estate company from a single rented office on Broadway. The ballroom that night was everything I had once only dreamed about. Crystal chandeliers, round tables draped in white linen, Nashville's most prominent business names filling every chair. A live jazz quartet played near the entrance. I stood near the edge of the room in my best tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne. I had no interest in drinking, watching Maggie work the crowd. And she was good at it, I had always known that. She moved through the room like she owned it, which according to the divorce papers I would receive 10 days later, she believed she did. She laughed at something a developer from Brentwood said. She shook hands with a city councilman. She kissed a woman on the cheek near the bar. And through all of it, she never once turned around to see where I was standing. I tried to introduce myself to a couple near the dessert table. The husband, a heavy-set man in a gray suit, looked genuinely surprised when I told him I was the founder of Callahan Properties. "I thought Margaret built this company," he said, not unkindly. Just honestly. My chest tightened. "We built it together," I said. He nodded politely, the way people do when they don't quite believe you, and turned back to his wife. Later in the evening, Maggie found me near the windows overlooking 2nd Avenue. The city below glittered in the cold February night. For a moment, standing there together, I thought of the way things used to be, the two of us at our kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, talking about the future like it was something we were building with our own hands. Because we were. "You look tired," Maggie said, glancing at me sideways. "Long night," I replied. She took a slow sip of her champagne. 3 people nearby were deep in their own conversation, close enough to hear us if they chose to. And then Maggie turned to me, not with cruelty, not with heat, but with the flat, measured calm of someone delivering a business decision, and said, "She found me near the windows that night and said something I have not stopped hearing since, something about being invisible, about being replaceable, about how long she had known it and how long she had said nothing. The words were quiet and precise, and they landed like something irreversible. The words landed like a hand pressed flat against my chest. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The jazz quartet started a new song somewhere behind us. Glasses clinked. People laughed. The whole room kept moving, kept breathing, as if the ground had not just shifted beneath my feet. Maggie set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray and moved back into the crowd without another word. I stood at that window for a long time after she was gone, staring down at the lights of the city, below the city where I had spent 35 years building something I believed in. Building something I believed we both believed in. Back in the courtroom, the heavy side door swung open and Judge Patricia Williams entered. Everyone rose. I pushed myself to my feet, my knees stiff, my back aching the way it always did on cold mornings now. "Be seated," the judge said. I sat back down. Across the aisle, Maggie smoothed the front of her blazer and folded her hands neatly on the table. She still had not looked at me, but I was looking at her. And I was thinking about one thing, one person actually, someone whose name I had not known 3 weeks ago. Someone I was half expecting to walk through that courtroom door at any moment. Someone who I had come to believe might be the only person in Nashville willing to tell the truth about what had really happened inside Callahan Properties. There are things a courtroom cannot measure. Sitting at that table with James Hartwell beside me, watching Maggie smooth the front of her blazer like this was just another board meeting. I kept thinking about a kitchen table 35 years ago, about graph paper and bad coffee and a radiator that knocked all night. About the moment I laid everything on the line, not just money, but every certain thing I had ever built for myself. That was where Callahan Properties really began. Not in any courthouse, not in any boardroom. At a kitchen table in East Nashville in the fall of 1990. I had been awake until midnight putting the last numbers together when Maggie came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She looked at the papers spread across the table and pulled out the chair across from me. "All right," she said. "Walk me through it." So I did. Every projection, every risk, every reason I believed Nashville's commercial real estate market was about to grow in ways most people hadn't figured out yet. I talked for close to 40 minutes. She didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped, she leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "What's the part that scares you most?" she asked. "The money," I said. "We don't have enough, and I don't know if anyone's going to lend it to us." She brought her eyes back down to mine. "Then we find someone who will." "Maggie, it's not that simple. We'd have to put everything on the line. The savings, the car, maybe the apartment." "I know what it means, Robert." Her voice was steady. No hesitation, no fear. Just that quiet certainty she had always carried better than anyone I'd ever met. "But I also know you. And if you believe this is going to work, then I believe in you. That doesn't change based on the bank balance." The next morning, I walked into my supervisor's office at the engineering firm and gave my notice. 7 years I had worked there. My supervisor, a heavy-set man named Doug Fletcher, who wore the same corduroy jacket every Friday, stared at me from across his desk, like I had just told him I was moving to the moon. "You're leaving a guaranteed salary to start a real estate company," Doug said flatly. "Yes, sir. In this economy. Nashville's growing, Doug, faster than anyone's tracking it. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "I hope you know what you're doing, Robert." "I hope so too," I said honestly. 3 weeks later, Callahan Properties was officially incorporated in the state of Tennessee. The founding document listed one name as Principal Robert James Callahan. The money was harder than I had let on to Maggie. 4 banks. 5 months. The first 3 said no before I had finished laying out the second page of the business plan. The 4th Tennessee First Bank, a regional lender on Charlotte Avenue, agreed to a full review. The loan officer was a methodical man named Harold Briggs. He wore the same brown tie to every meeting and had a habit of asking the same question twice from different angles, as if he was testing whether the answer would change. After 6 weeks of back and forth, he called me in and set the paperwork on the desk between us. "Mr. Callahan," Harold said, sliding the documents toward me, "the plan is solid, but your collateral is thin. The only way I can approve this is if you sign a personal guarantee. Meaning if the company can't repay, the bank comes after me personally." "That's correct. Your personal assets, savings, property, vehicle, everything attached to your name." I looked down at the papers. $200,000. 9% interest. 7-year repayment term. "Give me a pen," I said. Harold paused. "You don't want to take that home and think about it overnight." "I've been thinking about it for 5 months," I said. "Give me the pen, Harold." He did. I signed on every line he pointed to. My hand was steadier than I expected. That evening, I sat down at the kitchen table across from Maggie and told her exactly what I had done. She listened without moving her coffee cup held in both hands. 200,000, she said when I finished. 200,000. "And if it fails, then we start over," I said. "But it's not going to fail." She set her cup down and looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Okay," she said. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." The first office of Callahan Properties was a single rented room above a print shop on Broadway, barely enough space for a desk. 2 chairs and a filing cabinet that wouldn't close all the way. I was there every morning by 6:30. Cold calls until my voice cracked. Site visits on my own time. Late nights studying zoning maps and market reports I could barely afford to subscribe to. Maggie kept her job at the insurance agency for the first 2 years to keep us from going under while the company found its footing. Every evening she came home, made dinner, and then sat down beside me at that same kitchen table to help sort invoices, draft client correspondence, and work through the quarterly reports I still hadn't quite figured out. One night, somewhere around 11 o'clock, she looked up from a stack of files and said, "Robert, we haven't had a weekend since March." "I know," I said without looking up. "I'm not complaining." She flipped to the next page. "I'm just noting it for the record." I finally looked up. She was already back to reading, pen in hand, her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. And I thought, this woman right here. "Maggie." Thank you." She looked up then and smiled at me over the top of her glasses, that real smile, the one that reached her eyes. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Thank me when we close the first real contract." We closed it in the spring of 1991. A commercial renovation in Donelson, east of the city. Nothing glamorous. But I remember signing that contract like I remember the day Nathan was born, completely, permanently, in every detail. 1 contract became 3. 3 became 12. By 2005, Callahan Properties was among the top commercial real estate firms in the greater Nashville market. And through all of it, Maggie was beside me. She had a gift for client relationships I never quite matched. People trusted her immediately, the way you trust someone who looks you in the eye and means every word. Over time, it made sense for her to take on more of the public-facing leadership. She was better at it than I was. I was proud of her. Genuinely, completely proud. I never imagined, not for a single moment, that everything we had built together would one day become a weapon used against me. But somewhere in those years of success, something in Maggie had begun to quietly shift. I just didn't see it coming until it was already too late. Looking back now, I can see exactly when it started. The trouble is, I couldn't see it at the time because it happened the way bad things usually happen in a long marriage. Not with a bang. Not with a fight that clears the air and leaves everything honest. It happened the way a slow leak happens in an old house quietly, steadily, until the damage is already done, and you're standing in the water wondering how long it's been rising. By 2010, Callahan Properties had become something neither Maggie nor I had fully imagined sitting at that kitchen table 20 years earlier. 3 floors on Commerce Street, 40 employees, a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Nashville skyline. The company was profitable, respected, and expanding into markets across Middle Tennessee. We had built something real, something that mattered. But somewhere in the middle of all that success, the ground beneath my feet had started to shift, and I was the last one to notice. The first sign came when the board suggested Maggie take over as CEO. The company had grown to a size that needed a different kind of public leadership. Maggie was better at that than I was, the dinners, the speeches, the room working, that I had always found exhausting. I stepped back into a senior advisory role, and told myself it was the right move. For the company. For both of us. I believed that for about 6 months. Then, at a Chamber of Commerce dinner in the spring of 2011, I sat in the audience and listened to Maggie give a 5-minute speech about the founding of Callahan Properties. She talked about vision. She talked about risk. She talked about the early years with the kind of warmth and detail that told me she remembered every bit of it. My name never came up, not once. I waited until we got home. We were barely through the front door, Maggie reaching to hang up her coat, when I said, "You didn't mention me tonight." Not once in the whole speech. Didn't mention us. She turned from the coat hook with the expression of someone who had been expecting this and was already mildly exhausted by it. "Robert, it was 5 minutes. I wasn't going to give the entire company biography. I'm not asking for a biography. I'm asking for one sentence, one mention, that's all. You're being sensitive." The word hit me like cold water. "Sensitive," I repeated slowly. "Yes." She walked past me toward the kitchen. "You've always made recognition into a bigger thing than it needs to be. It's not a flattering quality, Robert." I stood in the entryway with my jacket still on, the house quiet around me, feeling something cold settle in the center of my chest. Not rage, not even real anger. Just the first long, quiet note of something I didn't want to name yet. The comments came more often after that. Never loud enough to become an argument. Never cruel enough to give me something solid to push back against. Just precise enough to sting and then vanish before I could get a grip on them. At a company holiday party in December 2014, I wore a navy blazer I had owned for years, good fabric, well-fitted, still sharp. Maggie appeared at my elbow without warning and murmured low enough that only I could hear. "That blazer is 10 years old, Robert. People in this room notice everything." I looked at her. "You want me to throw out a perfectly good blazer. I want you to think about the image we project." She smiled at someone across the room and lifted her glass in a small greeting. "That's all." "The image we project," I repeated under my breath, but she had already drifted away. In the spring of 2016, at a charity auction for a children's hospital downtown, I started telling a story to the couple we'd been seated with, a story about the early days of Callahan Properties, about the first contract, about what it felt like to sign your name on something and not know whether it would hold. It was a good story. The couple was leaning forward. Maggie placed her hand on my forearm and said brightly, pleasantly, as if she were doing me a favor, "Sweetheart, I don't think we need to put them through the whole origin story tonight." She laughed lightly. The couple laughed with her. I stopped talking and picked up my water glass and looked at the centerpiece for the rest of the table conversation. By 2018, the invitations had stopped coming altogether. "I'd like to come to the Atlanta dinner," I said one morning over breakfast. "I know half those developers personally." Maggie set her coffee cup down and tilted her head with that careful, measuring expression she had perfected over years of boardroom negotiations. "I don't think that's the right fit for this one," she said. "Why not? These are relationship dinners. They're delicate, adding another voice to the dynamic." She paused, choosing her words the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel. "It could complicate things." My jaw tightened so hard I felt it in my back teeth. "I spent 30 years building relationships in this industry, Maggie. That's not a complication. That's an asset." "I know it is." Her voice was patient and warm and somehow completely immovable. "And I use that asset all the time, Robert. But not at this dinner." She picked up her coffee again and glanced at her phone on the counter. "I have a 7:30 call. Can we finish this later?" She didn't wait for me to answer. She picked up the phone and walked out of the kitchen, and I sat at the table staring at her empty chair, my eggs going cold in front of me, my hands flat on the table like I was trying to keep the surface from tilting. That night I sat on the back porch long after dinner was done. The Nashville skyline glowed faintly in the distance. Nathan's old tire swing was still out there in the dark. I could just make out the shape of it against the tree line turning slowly in the wind. I had been meaning to take it down or fix it up for longer than I could honestly remember. I never did either one. My chest ached in the way it does when you've been holding tension in your body for so long. You've stopped noticing it until you finally sit still. And sitting still out there in the dark, I noticed all of it at once. Every clipped comment, every redirected introduction, every dinner I hadn't been invited to, every speech where my name hadn't been spoken. I told myself I was imagining it, that Maggie was under pressure, that successful marriages go through difficult seasons and come out stronger on the other side. I told myself that for another 4 years, and I almost made myself believe it. The name first came up on a Tuesday evening in January of 2023. We were eating dinner, grilled chicken Maggie had made without much thought. The kind of meal that fills the space without requiring effort. Rain tapped steadily against the kitchen windows. The television murmured in the other room. It was the most ordinary evening imaginable, which is probably why I remember every detail of it so clearly. "Finally feel the difference that new executive assistant is making," Maggie said, cutting her chicken without looking up from her plate. "Tyler Brooks, Vanderbilt, MBA. You remember I mentioned him last year. He's been with us 12 months now, and I genuinely don't know how I managed before him." "That's good," I said. "You've needed the support for a while now." She nodded once and shifted to talking about a zoning dispute on a property in Brentwood, and I finished my dinner and moved on. And I did not think about Tyler Brooks again that night. But within 2 weeks, I had heard the name at least 15 more times. Tyler handled the Meridian account without a single follow-up call. Tyler reorganized the entire document management system over a weekend. Tyler caught a contract error in the Henderson file that saved us $40,000 and a potential lawsuit. Tyler booked the flights for the Dallas trip at half the usual cost by rerouting through Memphis. Every evening, over every meal, in every passing comment between bites and sips, Tyler Brooks. One evening, about 3 weeks into this, I finally said something. I kept my voice easy, almost casual, like a man making conversation rather than asking the question that had been sitting at the back of his throat all week. "You mention Tyler quite a bit these days," I said. Maggie looked up briefly. "He's good at his job. I mention him because he comes up." "Of course," I said. "How old did you say he was?" 30. Her eyes went back to her plate. "And he's been traveling with you on the client trips." She set her fork down with a small, deliberate clink and looked at me the way she looked at junior associates who asked questions she found beneath the meeting. "Robert, he is my executive assistant. Executive assistants travel with executives. That is the nature of the position." "Right," I said. Of course it is. But something in her voice had been too smooth, too prepared. The way an answer sounds when it has been rehearsed rather than reached for. By March, the phone had a new passcode. I noticed it one Saturday morning when she left it on the bathroom counter, and I picked it up out of habit just to check the time, nothing more. The screen asked for a 6-digit code I had never been given. I set it back down on the counter carefully, like it was something breakable, and walked out to the kitchen and made coffee and did not say a single word about it. Because I was still in the part of the story where I was telling myself I was wrong. That part of the story ended in April. I came into the kitchen one evening to refill my water glass and found Maggie standing at the counter with her back to me, her shoulders curved slightly inward, thumbs moving fast across her phone screen. She was typing the way people type when they are trying to finish before someone arrives, quick, focused, urgent. When she heard my footsteps on the hardwood, she snapped upright and turned around, the phone dropping to her side in one smooth motion. Everything all right? I asked, my voice careful and neutral. Fine, she said. Just the one word, bright and immediate. Client question. Nothing urgent. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It's 9:45 at night. Development doesn't run on a 9-to-5 schedule, and you know that better than anyone, Robert. Her voice carried just the faintest edge, not hostile, just firm enough to close the subject. Fair enough, I said. I filled my glass, turned off the faucet, and walked back out of the kitchen. My hand was perfectly steady on the glass. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to get out. The following week, I did something I have never told anyone about until now. I opened the company's shared scheduling system on my home office computer. I still had access as a senior advisor, and no one had thought to revoke it. I pulled up Maggie's travel calendar and went back 6 months, 7 trips. Dallas in February, Atlanta in March, Memphis in April, Charlotte in May, Cincinnati and Lexington back-to-back in June, Birmingham in July. Tyler Brooks was listed as the accompanying staff member on every single one. My throat went dry so fast it was almost dizzying. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. 7 for 7. Not occasionally, not sometimes. Every single trip without one exception, Tyler Brooks was there. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark office for a long time, with my hands in my lap, staring at nothing. The room felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. The walls felt closer. My breathing had gone shallow without my noticing, and when I finally took a full, deliberate breath, my chest ached with the effort of it. I walked out onto the back porch. January air hit my face like a closed fist, sharp and cold and clarifying in the way only real cold can be. I stuffed my hands into the pockets of my cardigan and stood at the railing, looking out at the backyard. Nathan's old tire swing was moving in the dark, turning lazy, slow circles in the wind. The rope at the top was fraying where it looped over the oak branch. I had been meaning to fix that rope for 3 years running. Every spring I looked at it and thought, this weekend I will take care of that. And every weekend something else came up, and there it still was, slowly unraveling, while I wasn't paying close enough attention. My eyes burned, not from the cold. Robert? Maggie's voice came through the back screen door light and unhurried. You coming back inside? It's freezing out there. I swallowed hard before I answered. Give me a minute. Your tea is getting cold. I said, give me a minute, Maggie. My voice came out rougher than I intended, rougher than I had let it be with her in years. A pause. The screen door creaked as she shifted her weight behind it. Then, okay. And her footsteps retreated back into the house. I stood out there until my fingers went numb and the yard blurred at the edges. I stood there because walking back inside meant walking past her in the kitchen and pretending I hadn't just counted 7 trips on a calendar. It meant smiling over tea and talking about nothing and sleeping on my side of the bed and waking up tomorrow and doing it all again. and I wasn't sure I had enough left in me for that particular performance anymore. The invitation had said black tie optional, which in Maggie's world meant she would arrive looking like she owned the room, because by that point in February of 2025, she essentially did. I wore the charcoal suit I had bought in 2019. It still fit across the shoulders barely. I had stood in front of the bathroom mirror for longer than I intended that evening, adjusting my tie, looking at the face of a man who was 65 years old and could not entirely explain why he felt nervous about attending a party thrown in the name of the company he had founded. The Omni Nashville Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed completely white linen, over every table centerpieces of pale roses and eucalyptus sprigs, a string quartet in the far corner near the bar playing something low and elegant that I recognized without being able to name. The annual Callahan Properties Charity Gala had grown far beyond anything I had imagined when Maggie and I had launched the first one in 2001 with 30 guests and a catered spread from a Church Street deli. Tonight, 200 people moved through the ballroom in clusters, champagne in hand, the kind of crowd that knows how to be seen without appearing to try. I had helped design the company logo, projected above the stage in polished gold letters. I had done it in 1995 on a yellow legal pad at our kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee at my elbow and Nathan asleep in the next room. Nobody in that ballroom knew that. Maggie was already working the crowd when we arrived. I spotted her immediately moving through the room with the fluid confidence of someone who had been doing this for 20 years and never once found it exhausting. Her navy blazer caught the light when she turned. Her laugh carried. When she extended her hand to greet someone, they leaned toward her the way people lean toward warmth. I got myself a glass of water from the bar and found a position near the east wall where I could observe without being in anyone's way. That was when I saw Tyler Brooks for the first time in person. He was positioned approximately 6 feet behind Maggie's left shoulder, close enough to be useful, far enough to appear professional. He was younger than I had pictured from the descriptions Maggie had given me, mid-30s, at most dark-haired, with the alert, contained posture of someone trained to anticipate rather than react. When a server passed with a tray, Tyler intercepted it without being signaled, lifted a fresh glass of champagne, and had it in Maggie's hand before she finished her current sentence. She did not break her conversation to acknowledge him. She did not need to. He simply appeared at the exact right moment, placed the glass, and stepped back. I watched that exchange until I realized I had been watching it for too long. The room settled when Maggie took the stage an hour into the evening. 200 people orienting toward her simultaneously, the way a room of plants turns toward a light source, automatic, complete without any apparent effort on anyone's part. She stood at the microphone with the easy authority of someone who has never in her life been uncertain about whether she belongs at the front of a room. 35 years ago, she began, her voice warm and carrying cleanly to every corner of the ballroom. A small commercial real estate firm opened its doors in Nashville with 2 employees, 1 client, and considerably more optimism than the situation probably warranted. Laughter moved through the crowd, genuine, fond, the laughter of people who enjoy the person speaking. Tonight, we celebrate what Callahan Properties has become. But more than that, we celebrate the people who made it. She paused. In that pause, something in my chest rose, old, involuntary, the reflex of a man who has spent 35 years waiting to be included. I want to thank our extraordinary staff, our partners, our clients, the Nashville community that has trusted us year after year. She raised her glass. And I want to thank every person in this room for being part of this story. The applause started warm and swelled. She stepped off the stage into a current of handshakes and embraces, and she had not said my name once. Not once. Not a single time. I set my water glass on the nearest table and walked to the windows at the far end of the ballroom. The tall ones that looked out over downtown Nashville, the Cumberland River, a dark ribbon of reflected light below. I stood with my back to the room, and my hands in my pockets, and breathed in measured counts until I felt something close to steady. I heard her heels before I heard her voice. "You're standing in the corner," Maggie said, appearing at my shoulder. Her tone was the pleasantly neutral one she used at professional events, conversational, unruffled, giving nothing away. "You didn't mention me." I turned to face her and kept my voice low because the nearest cluster of guests was 8 feet away, and I still had enough self-possession for that. "Not once. You introduced Tyler by name to the Meridian Group partners. You introduced the CFO. You introduced the junior associates from Memphis individually. You stood at that microphone and said the people who built this, and you did not say my name." Something shifted in her expression. Not guilt, something further past guilt than that something that had finished with guilt a long time ago and moved on. Her face settled into a stillness that I had never seen on it before. A stillness that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with decision. "You want the truth," she said. Her voice was level and precise the way a blade is level before it cuts. "You walked in here tonight, and not a single person in this room knew who you were. Not one. You've been replaceable for a long time, Robert. I just never told you." The words moved through me the way deep cold moves through insufficient shelter, not dramatically, not in a rush, but completely. Every layer. My chest contracted so hard I felt the pressure behind my sternum and up into my throat. My hands, still in my pockets, closed into fists without my deciding to close them. My eyes went hot and sharp, and I held her gaze because looking away would have meant something I was not willing to concede. This was the woman who had held my hand when I signed a loan that could have taken everything from us. This was the woman who had written in her own careful handwriting on cream stationery in 1994 that none of what we were building would exist without me. This was the woman I had given 35 years to, without reservation, without condition, without once asking what I was getting in return. And she was standing in front of me in the ballroom of the Omni Nashville Hotel with 200 people 20 feet away telling me I was no one. "Maggie," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to, stripped of everything except the essential question. "Do you have any idea what you just said to me?" She picked up her champagne glass from the windowsill. "I said something that's been true for quite a while." She looked at me one final time, not with cruelty, which would at least have required effort, but with the flat, finished regard of a woman who has already moved past this conversation. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." Her heels marked a clean, unhurried rhythm across the marble floor as she walked back into the crowd. I watched until the current of 200 people absorbed her completely, and she was gone. I stood at that window alone. The Nashville skyline blazed cold and brilliant behind the glass. The string quartet had shifted to something slower. Somewhere in the room behind me I heard Tyler Brooks say something that made a group of people laugh easy and relaxed the laugh of a man entirely at home in a place that used to be mine. My chest ached with the particular bone-deep ache of a man who has just understood something he cannot unknow. My eyes were burning dry and sharp, held back by nothing more than the last thin wire of dignity I had left. 10 days later, an envelope arrived on my kitchen counter. I did not know it yet, standing at that window. But everything that came after the basement, the courtroom, the truth began in this exact moment, with the sound of her heels walking away and the Nashville lights burning cold behind the glass. 10 days after the gala, I woke up to rain. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of rain that announces itself with thunder and feels like the sky is trying to tell you something. Just a gray, steady February drizzle that had been going since before dawn, the kind that settles into the city and doesn't rush and doesn't apologize. I lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to it against the window. The other side of the bed was already empty. Maggie had been leaving before I woke up for the past week and a half. I had stopped noting the time she set her alarm. I got up, put on a pot of coffee, pulled on my wool cardigan and my waterproof boots, and went outside to get the newspaper and check the mail. A habit from 40 years ago that I had never managed to break even now that half the news came through a phone. The mailbox held 2 pieces of junk mail in one envelope. The junk mail was the usual, a furniture catalog, a credit card offer with my name spelled wrong. The envelope was different, crisp white, no return address. Just my name in printed type, Robert James Callahan, and a logo in the upper left corner I recognized immediately. Moore and Associates Attorneys at Law. Catherine Moore's firm. I stood in the drizzle holding that envelope for what felt like a long time. The rain tapped softly on my shoulders. A car moved slowly down the wet street in front of the house. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. I went back inside. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had spread out the original business plan for Callahan Properties 35 years ago. My coffee was still hot. I set the envelope in front of me and looked at it. Then I opened it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. State of Tennessee. Davidson County. I read the first page twice. Then I turned to the second. Petitioner Margaret Ann Callahan hereby asserts that the marital estate including, but not limited to Callahan Properties, LLC, and associated real assets was built primarily through the professional efforts and leadership of the petitioner during her tenure as Chief Executive Officer. I set the page down, picked up my coffee, set it back down without drinking. Respondent Robert James Callahan is characterized herein as a non-contributing spouse whose involvement in the growth and development of the company's primary assets has been minimal and informal in nature. Non-contributing spouse. I said those 3 words out loud there alone at the kitchen table just to hear what they sounded like. They sounded exactly as wrong as they read. I turned through the rest of the document slowly, page by page. The house was completely quiet around me. Just the rain on the windows, just the refrigerator humming, just the sound of 35 years of my life being reduced to a legal filing in a Nashville courthouse. Maggie was requesting the family home, Callahan Properties in its entirety, the joint investment accounts, the retirement funds, the vacation property in Gatlinburg we had bought on our 20th anniversary. Everything. She was requesting everything. My hands were not shaking, which surprised me. My chest felt like someone had set a concrete block on it and walked away. But my hands were steady on the pages, turning them one by one, reading every line, refusing to skim anything. When I reached the last page, I set the whole document down in a neat stack, squared the corners the way I had always squared papers on a desk, and picked up my phone. James Hartwell was a name that a friend of mine, a developer I had worked with years ago named Pete Garrison, had given me over a round of golf 6 months back. Best divorce attorney in Nashville, Pete had said, which I remembered because the comment had made me deeply uncomfortable at the time. I had not imagined I would ever need a divorce attorney. I had certainly not imagined I would be calling one on a rainy Tuesday morning in February while my coffee went cold beside me. James answered on the 3rd ring. Hartwell. James, this is Robert Callahan. Pete Garrison gave me your number a while back. I don't know if you remember. I remember, he said. His voice was measured and unhurried. The voice of a man who had received calls like this one many times and understood what they cost the person making them. What's happened, Robert? I received divorce papers this morning. I heard how flat my voice sounded, almost businesslike. From my wife's attorney, Catherine Moore's firm. A brief pause. Catherine Moore. He said the name the way you say the name of an opponent you respect and intend to defeat. All right. Can you come in this afternoon? I can come in right now if you'll see me. Give me until 2 o'clock. And Robert, bring everything you have. Bank records, company documents, anything with your name on it going back as far as you can find. Don't leave anything behind. Understood, I said. And Robert. His voice shifted slightly, still professional, but with something underneath it that felt almost like kindness. This is going to be all right. That's not a promise about outcomes. It's a promise about the process. Come in at 2. I ended the call and sat at the table for a long time after. At 7:15 that evening, I heard the front door open. Maggie's heels on the entryway tile. The familiar sound of her setting her bag down, hanging up her coat. Then she came into the kitchen and stopped. The petition was still on the table in front of me where I had left it all day. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. Her face was composed, not cold exactly, but sealed the way a room looks when all the windows have been shut and locked and nobody is expected for a long time. So you got it, she said. I got it. My voice was quiet, controlled. I had spent the entire afternoon practicing controlled. Maggie, 35 years. I built that company. You know I built that company. Something moved across her face, fast, almost invisible. Then it was gone, replaced by that sealed expression again. I know we both contributed, Robert. The attorneys will sort out what that means. Non-contributing spouse, I said. That's what your attorneys wrote. Non-contributing spouse. She pressed her lips together briefly. I didn't write the filing, Robert. Catherine did. You signed it. She picked up her bag from where she had set it on the counter. I'm going to go change. We can talk about this when you're not. She gestured vaguely at me. When I'm not what? My voice cracked slightly on the last word, just the one syllable, and I hated it. She walked out of the kitchen without finishing the sentence. That was the last night we slept under the same roof. By the time I came upstairs, the light under the guest room door was already off, and I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the rain that was still falling outside, and I felt the full and absolute weight of what was coming. The divorce papers had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 4 days when Nathan finally called. I was standing at the window holding a mug of coffee I had not touched in 20 minutes, watching a gray February rain streak down the glass. The yard looked smaller than I remembered. Everything looked smaller lately, the house, the furniture, my own reflection in the window. When my phone buzzed and Nathan's name lit up the screen, my chest tightened so hard I had to press my free hand flat against my sternum just to breathe through it. I answered on the second ring. Nathan, Dad. His voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man who had rehearsed what he planned to say. We need to talk. I've been waiting for you to call. I set the mug down on the windowsill. My hand was steadier than I expected. 4 days, Nathan. 4 days since your mother's attorney served me those papers, and this is the first I'm hearing from you. I know, I'm sorry, I needed time to think. Time to think, I repeated. The words landed flat and hollow in my chest. And what did you decide? He exhaled long and slow, the kind of breath a person lets out before delivering news they know will hurt. Dad, I think you should consider signing. I think fighting this is only going to drag everything out and make it worse for everyone involved. My jaw tightened so fast I heard my own teeth click together. You think I should sign away everything I built over 35 years? You didn't build it alone. His voice sharpened just slightly, just enough. Mom built it too. She's been running the day-to-day operations for over a decade. She has the relationships, she has the client base. Nathan. I cut him off, and my voice cracked straight down the middle, raw and uneven in a way I hadn't expected. I signed the first loan. My name is on the original articles of incorporation. I worked without a salary for the first 3 years of that company, so we could make payroll. Do you understand what that means? We were eating sandwiches for dinner so I could make sure 12 employees got their checks on time. I know you sacrificed a lot, Dad. But his tone softened with something that was not quite sympathy. It was closer to pity, and that stung far worse. But the legal reality is, Don't tell me about legal reality. My voice was shaking now. I couldn't stop it. My hands were shaking too, both of them, the phone trembling against my ear. Your mother's attorney wrote in that petition that I am a non-contributing spouse. Those are the exact words. Non-contributing. After 35 years. Dad, she listed me as a financial liability, Nathan. She told the court I contributed nothing of material value. That is not a legal maneuver. That is a lie. And I need you, your own son, to look me in the eye and tell me you believe that. The pause that followed was not long. But it was long enough. Long enough for something in my chest to crack open that I knew would not easily close again. I don't think you contributed nothing, Nathan said at last. But Mom is the one who grew it. She's the one who built the client relationships, who expanded into 4 states, who brought in the big commercial contracts. You stepped back a long time ago, Dad. That's just the truth. I stepped back because she asked me to. My voice dropped to something rough and scraped down to the bone. She said it would look better if she was the public face. She said she needed room to lead. I trusted her. I gave her that room because I trusted her, and now you're telling me that trust is why I deserve to walk away with nothing. I'm telling you, it's complicated, Nathan said, and there was something in his voice now, a tightness I could not quite name. And I'm telling you that fighting her in court is going to cost you more than you gain, emotionally, financially, everything. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth for a moment. My eyes were burning hot and sharp, the kind of burn that precedes something I had not let myself do in 40 years of marriage. I breathed through it hard, forcing it back down. Is this coming from you? I said finally, my voice barely above a rasp. Or is this coming from her? Another pause, longer this time. It's coming from me, he said. But he said it a half-second too slowly. Something split wide open in my chest, not dramatically, not with any kind of cinematic grief, just quietly and completely, like a seam giving way after years of too much pressure. My son, the boy I drove to soccer practice in a rusted-out Civic because we couldn't afford anything better. The boy I sat up with at 3 in the morning when he had pneumonia at age 7 was standing on the other side of this phone call and asking me to surrender. I love you, Nathan, I said. My throat was so tight and the words came out rough and strange. I want you to know that. Whatever happens in that courtroom, I love you. Dad, don't, but I am not signing those papers. I steadied my voice with everything I had left. I am not walking away from what I built. I am not going to tell a judge that 35 years of my life meant nothing because it is more convenient for your mother if I do. And if you need to stand with her, then you stand with her. But don't ask me to help you do it. I heard Amber's voice in the background, low, urgent, just out of range. Nathan said something back to her I couldn't make out. Then he came back to the line. Just think about it, okay? He said. Please, just think about it. I already have, I said, and I ended the call. I stood at that kitchen window for a long time, after my forehead resting against the cold glass, my breath fogging the pane in slow, uneven clouds. The coffee on the windowsill had gone completely cold. The rain was still falling. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with my heart, and everything to do with it at the same time. I had always believed that blood was the one thing in this world that would hold. 35 years of building something, a marriage, a company, a family, and I had believed down to the marrow that if everything else fell apart, my son would still be there. Standing in that kitchen with the phone still warm in my hand and Nathan's careful, rehearsed voice still ringing in my ears, I understood something for the first time. I had been wrong about that too. I pushed off from the window. The basement door was at the far end of the hallway, a door I hadn't opened in years. Somewhere behind it, in a filing cabinet I had not touched since 2010, was a folder I suddenly needed very badly to find. The basement smelled like old paper and dry concrete. the particular smell of things that have been undisturbed for a very long time. I pulled the string on the bare overhead bulb and stood there, while the light swung in a slow arc, throwing shadows across the shelving units I'd built myself in 1998. Christmas decorations in plastic bins, a broken treadmill Maggie had insisted on buying and used exactly twice. Boxes of Nathan's childhood things, report cards, Little League trophies, the crayon drawings he made in kindergarten that she and I had argued over keeping. I had not been down here in over 3 years. I found the filing cabinet in the far corner, a 4-drawer steel unit I'd bought from an office liquidation sale in 1991 for $65. I tried the top drawer. Locked. I stood there staring at it, my jaw tight, running through a mental inventory of where I might have put the key. Then I remembered left breast pocket of an old sport coat hanging in the upstairs closet since approximately 2009. 12 minutes later, I was back with the key. The top drawer rolled open with a grinding reluctance, the kind that comes from metal that hasn't moved in years. Inside hanging folders, each one labeled in my own handwriting, precise upright, the handwriting of an engineer. I found the one I was looking for near the back. It was labeled simply Callahan Properties Founding Documents. My hands were not entirely steady when I lifted it out. I carried the folder to the old workbench against the wall, pulled up a rusted metal stool, and spread the contents out under the swinging light. The first page I pulled was a photocopy of the Articles of Incorporation filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State on October 14, 1990. 35 years ago, almost to the month. At the top of the page in the designated field for registered agent and organizer was my name, Robert James Callahan. My vision blurred. I pressed the heel of my hand hard against one eye, then the other, clearing it. I was not going to fall apart in a basement. I was 65 years old, and I had not come this far to fall apart in a basement. The next document was the personal guarantee agreement from Tennessee, First Bank, the $200,000 loan at 9% interest signed February 3, 1991. My signature on the bottom. Only my signature. Maggie had been in the room when I signed it. She'd squeezed my hand afterward and said, "We're really doing this, aren't we?" I could still hear exactly how she'd said it, the wonder in her voice, the way she'd laughed a little on the exhale. I had to set that one down and look away for a moment, because the memory hit me somewhere between the ribs, and I was not prepared for it. "James." I dialed Hartwell's number from where I sat on the stool. He picked up on the second ring. "Robert, everything okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I found something. I'm in my basement in an old filing cabinet. I have the original Articles of Incorporation. My name is listed as the sole organizer and registered agent. I have the original personal guarantee on the startup loan, only my signature. I think this matters. It matters enormously." His voice shifted, sharpened the way it did when he was thinking fast. "Is the paperwork in good condition?" "Good enough. 35 years old, but legible. Can you bring it to my office tomorrow morning?" "All of it. Don't separate anything. Don't make copies yourself yet. And for God's sake, don't let Maggie know you found it. She's not here." I looked around the basement. "I don't think she's been in this house in 2 weeks." "Good. Keep it that way. Robert, listen to me. What you're describing could be the single most important piece of evidence in this case. Her attorney is going to argue that she built everything independently. These documents prove otherwise." "There's more," I said. I had reached the bottom of the folder. My fingers had found something I had entirely forgotten. An envelope, cream-colored and slightly yellowed, sealed with a dried strip of tape that had lost most of its adhesive. My name was written on the front in Maggie's handwriting. The handwriting from 30 years ago, before she had started signing everything with the bold, angular signature of a CEO. I opened the envelope carefully. "James, I'll call you back." "Robert." I set the phone face down on the workbench. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of cream stationery folded in thirds. I unfolded it under the swinging light. The date at the top read March 12th, 1994. 4 years into the company. The year Nathan was born. Robert, it began. I know you've been exhausted. I know the last 2 years have been harder than either of us expected. I watch you come home after midnight, week after week, and I know you never complain, not to me, not to anyone. And I want you to know that I see it. I see what you're doing. I see what you're building. None of this exists without you. Not the company, not the life we're building, not any of it. I don't say it enough, but I need you to know. All of this is yours as much as it is mine. More, maybe. Maggie. I held that letter in both hands for a long time. My eyes were burning, not the sharp sting of earlier, but something slower and deeper, the kind of burning that comes up from somewhere in the chest before it reaches the face. I pressed my lips together hard. I breathed through my nose, slow and deliberate, the way a man breathes when he is holding something together by sheer will. None of this exists without you. She had written that. Her handwriting, her signature, her words. 30 years ago, Maggie Callahan had put it in an envelope and left it for me to find. And now, 3 decades later, her attorney was standing in a Nashville courtroom arguing the exact opposite. I picked up my phone and called James back. I found a letter, I said. Handwritten. From Maggie, dated 1994. She explicitly states that the company belongs to both of us, that it would not exist without me. My voice was controlled. Carefully, deliberately controlled. I'm bringing everything tomorrow. Robert. James's voice was quieter now, almost gentle. This is a very good day. I know it doesn't feel like it, but this is a very good day. I folded the letter back into its envelope and held it against my chest for just a moment. Outside the basement window, the February rain had softened to a mist. The bare bulb swung in a slow, fading arc above me. I sat in that basement with 35 years of my life spread out across a workbench, and for the first time since those divorce papers had appeared on my counter, I felt something shift. Not hope exactly, not yet, but something close to it. Something that felt for the first time like it might hold. And then my phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I had never seen before. No name. Just 7 words. Mr. Callahan. There are things you need to know. The morning James Hartwell spread my basement documents across his conference table, the Nashville skyline outside his office window was the color of old pewter, a flat, featureless gray that matched exactly how I felt inside. It was the first Monday of March, and I had driven to his office on church, with the folder tucked under my arm, like it was something fragile, which I suppose it was. 35 years of proof carried in a manila envelope through a parking garage on a Tuesday morning. James met me at the elevator himself, which told me he understood what I was bringing him. Sit down, he said, pulling out the chair across from his own before I even had a chance to unbutton my coat. Let me see what you've got. I laid everything out in the order I had found it. Articles of incorporation, first, then the personal guarantee agreement from Tennessee First Bank, then Maggie's handwritten letter from 1994. James did not speak while he read. He put on his glasses and went through each page slowly and carefully, and I sat across from him with my hands flat on my knees, watching his face for any sign of what he was thinking. When he finished, he set his glasses on the table and looked at me directly. Robert, this letter alone could shift the entire framing of this case, he said. Catherine Moore has built her entire argument on the premise that Maggie was the sole architect of Callahan Properties and that you were at best a passive beneficiary. This letter in Maggie's own handwriting with a verifiable date explicitly contradicts that narrative. She wrote it in 1994, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. Nathan had just been born. I was working 80-hour weeks and she wanted me to know she saw it. And now her attorney is arguing she built it alone. James tapped the letter once with 2 fingers. The courts tend to notice that kind of discrepancy. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. I want to bring in a forensic accountant. Someone to go through the company's financials independently. Can you get me access to any of the financial records? Anything predating the last 3 years? I nodded slowly. I still have my login credentials for the company's legacy accounting system. Maggie switched the firm to new software in 2022, but the old system is still running on a server in the back office. I doubt she remembered I still have access. James straightened. Don't use it yet. Don't touch anything from the company side until I tell you to. But I want that access documented and ready. He pulled a legal pad toward him and started writing. I'm going to reach out to a forensic accountant I've worked with before, woman named Carol Briggs, no relation to your banker, excellent record in asset tracing cases in Tennessee. She'll need at least a week. A week, I repeated. I rubbed my jaw. The preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. I know. We'll make it work. He kept writing. In the meantime, I need you to write down everything you remember about the company finances, not just your involvement in founding it, but anything irregular you noticed in recent years. Anything that felt off. Withdrawals, transfers, vendors you didn't recognize. Anything. Something shifted in my stomach when he said that. There was something, I said. About 18 months ago, I happened to see a quarterly summary on the kitchen counter. Maggie had left it out. I don't know if by accident or not. There was a line item I didn't recognize. A vendor account labeled as a consulting firm. Donovan Strategic Partners. I asked her about it. James's pen stopped moving. What did she say? She said it was a new advisory firm they'd engaged for the Memphis expansion. She said the fees were standard for the scope of the project. I pressed my thumb hard against the inside of my other wrist, a habit I'd had since I was 30. Something I did when a memory was bothering me. I believed her. I had no reason not to. Donovan Strategic Partners. James wrote the name in block letters and underlined it twice. How much was the line item on that one quarterly summary? About $40,000. I exhaled through my nose. But that was just 1 quarter. James looked up at me over the top of his legal pad. I'm going to ask Carol to specifically trace any and all payments made to that vendor account, going back as far as the records allow. He set his pen down. Robert, I want to prepare you for the possibility that what we find may be more than irregular accounting. It may be evidence of deliberate financial misconduct. The words landed carefully and completely. My jaw tightened, and I felt a slow, dull ache spread from my chest outward. Not shock exactly, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I had been moving toward this understanding for days. But hearing it said plainly in a law office by an attorney who had been doing this for 25 years made it real in a way that my own fears had not. She's been moving money, I said. It was not quite a question. We don't know that yet. But I want to find out before Catherine Moore has a chance to bury it. James gathered the documents and squared them carefully at the edges. I'm going to make certified copies of everything and have the originals stored in our vault today. Are you all right? I looked out at the gray Nashville skyline for a moment. A pigeon landed on the window ledge outside, sat there for exactly 2 seconds, and flew away again. I built that company from a $65 filing cabinet and a personal loan I had no guarantee I could repay, I said. I'm not all right, but I'm not walking away from it either. James nodded once. Good. That's what I needed to hear. He stood and reached across the table to shake my hand firm, direct the handshake of a man who took things seriously. I'll have Carol start on Monday. Expect a call from her by end of week. I drove home with the certified copies on my passenger seat, sealed in a new envelope, with James's firm letterhead on it. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My eyes were dry. But somewhere under my ribs, something was pulling tight and tighter, the slow, awful tension of a man who is beginning to understand exactly how deep the betrayal goes. I was halfway across the Shelby Street Bridge when my phone lit up on the seat beside me. A text from the same unknown number that had reached me in the basement 5 days ago. Mr. Callahan, I know you spoke with your attorney this morning. I think it's time we met in person. I'll explain everything. Name the place. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Whoever this person was, they knew where I had been. They knew what I was doing, and they were not going away. I told myself I was being foolish. A man my age, 65, with a bad knee and a divorce petition sitting in his attorney's vault, had no business meeting a stranger who knew things they should not know. I told myself that on the drive over. I told myself that while I was parking on the street outside Frothy Monkey on 12th Avenue South, which was as public and well-lit a coffee shop as I knew in Nashville. It was a Wednesday mid-March, the kind of pale blue morning that tricks you into thinking spring has arrived when the temperature is still 44 degrees. I had texted back a single line Frothy Monkey on 12th Wednesday. 8 a.m. I'll be at a table in the back. He was already there when I walked in. I recognized him immediately, which surprised me. I had seen him only twice before, both times from across a room standing slightly behind Maggie at company functions. Younger than I remembered. Dark hair, cleanly cut, a gray button-down, with the sleeves rolled to the elbows despite the cold. He was holding a coffee cup in both hands and watching the door. And when he saw me walk in, he rose halfway from his chair before stopping himself. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "thank you for coming." "Tyler Brooks," I said. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. My eyes were reading his face the way I used to read engineering schematics, fast, systematic, looking for the weak point, the place where the structure didn't add up. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had not been sleeping well. "You have 30 minutes to tell me why I should trust a single word you say." He flinched slightly, just a compression around his eyes, quickly controlled. "That's fair," he said. "I'll try to make it worth your time. Start with how you knew I met with my attorney yesterday morning," I said. I kept my voice level and my hands on the table, flat and open. I was not going to give him the satisfactions of seeing me rattled. Not yet. "I didn't follow you," he said immediately. "I want to be clear about that. I heard it from someone inside the firm. One of the associates saw your car in the parking structure on Church Street and mentioned it." He wrapped his hands tighter around his cup. "I have people I still talk to at Callahan Properties. People who are worried. Worried about what? About what Maggie has been doing with the company finances." His voice dropped. Not theatrically, genuinely, the way a person speaks when they are saying something they know could cost them. "I worked for her for 2 years, Mr. Callahan. I was her executive assistant. I traveled with her, I managed her schedule, I sat outside her office during calls I was not supposed to hear." He paused. "I heard a lot." My jaw tightened. I kept my expression even with everything I had. "Then say what you came to say." "I am not, and I never was in a romantic relationship with your wife." He said it plainly, without flinching, holding my gaze with both hands. "I know what the rumors were. I know what people at the company believed. And I know that Maggie let those rumors stand because they were useful to her." The air in my chest changed. Not released, changed, shifted into something heavier and sharper. She spread them deliberately. Not spread exactly. She just never corrected them. Tyler set down his cup. "Here is what I know. Mr. Callahan and I will tell you plainly. Because you deserve plain, the rumors about her and me gave everyone something to talk about, something to see. While everyone was watching me, no one was watching Richard Donovan." My stomach went cold and hard like a stone dropped into January water. "Who is Richard Donovan?" He runs a real estate development firm out of Memphis, Donovan Strategic Partners. Tyler watched my face as he said the name. I think you've already heard it. My throat tightened so fast I nearly coughed. $40,000 per quarter. A vendor account on a quarterly summary. Maggie had left on the kitchen counter. I had asked about it, and she had answered without hesitating, smooth and certain the way she answered everything now. Standard consulting fees for the Memphis expansion. How long? My voice came out rougher than I intended. How long has this been going on? The payments to Donovan Strategic Partners go back at least 4 years based on what I saw. But the relationship... He stopped, chose his next words carefully. I believe the personal relationship between Maggie and Richard Donovan goes back further than that. I cannot give you a specific date, but what I can tell you is that in the last year and a half I worked for her, he was on her private calendar at least once a month. Always listed as a business meeting, never in the office, always off-site. I pressed both my palms flat against the tabletop. The wood was cool and solid under my hands, and I focused on that, the physical fact of it, because my chest had gone so tight, I could feel my heartbeat in my throat fast and hard and slightly out of rhythm. She was using company funds to pay him, I said. That is what I believe, yes. Tyler leaned forward slightly. Mr. Callahan, I want you to understand something. I left Callahan Properties 4 months ago. I gave my notice voluntarily, and I accepted a position at another firm. I did not leave because I was forced out. I left because I could not keep doing my job knowing what I knew and saying nothing. His voice was tight with something controlled and effortful. I should have said something sooner. I know that. I'm telling you now because you are in a divorce proceeding in which you are being described as a man who contributed nothing, and that is not true. I watched you come into that office when you still had access, and I watched the way the older staff talked about you. You built that place, and she is trying to take it. My eyes burned. I pressed my jaw together hard and looked past his shoulder at the window. The pale March light, the traffic on 12th Avenue, the ordinary morning world going about its business. I would not cry in a coffee shop across from a 30-year-old man I had met 12 minutes ago. I would not. What do you want from me? I asked when I trusted my voice again. Nothing, Tyler said. I want to help you. I have documentation, records. I kept copies of calendar entries, email threads, one particular recording that I think you need to hear. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, small, black, unremarkable. He set it on the table between us. Everything is on here. Give it to your attorney. I looked at the drive for a long moment. Then I looked at him. Why should I trust you? I asked. The question was not hostile. It was genuine. The question of a man who had been wrong about the person he'd trusted most for 35 years. Tyler met my gaze without wavering. Because I am the only person in your life right now who came to you with the truth instead of a reason for you to give up, he said quietly. And you know that. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't. My hand moved across the table and closed around the USB drive. It was small and light, and it sat in my palm like almost nothing at all. But my hand was trembling just slightly as I slipped it into my coat pocket, trembling not with fear, but with the particular terrifying sensation of a door swinging open in a house you thought you knew completely. Before I tell you what was on that USB drive, what Tyler handed me in that coffee shop, and I need to know you're still with me. If you're here, drop the number 11 in the comments right now. Just that. Just so I know. A small reminder. Parts of this story are fictional, crafted to carry a message worth hearing. If that's not for you, this is your moment to step away. No hard feelings. But if you're staying, you'll want to hear what comes next. I drove straight from Frothy Monkey to James Hartwell's office without calling ahead. His assistant, a practical woman named Donna, who had worked for James for 14 years and had seen every variety of human crisis walk through that door. Took one look at my face when I came off the elevator and picked up her phone without me saying a word. By the time I reached the conference room, James was already there, his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, which meant he had cleared whatever he had planned for the morning. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. "Tell me." I set the USB drive on the table between us. "Tyler Brooks," I said. "Maggie's former assistant. He contacted me. I met him this morning at a coffee shop on 12th Avenue. He says he has evidence, financial records, calendar entries, and at least one audio recording." I pressed my index finger against the drive. "It's all on here." James studied me for a moment. "You met him alone?" "I met him in a public coffee shop with 12 other people present," I said. "And yes, I went alone, because I'm 65 years old, and I used to assess structural risk for a living, and my read on that young man is that he's telling the truth." James pulled the drive toward him. "Let's find out." He plugged it into his laptop and turned the screen so we could both see it. The drive opened to 3 folders. The first was labeled Financials. The second was labeled Calendar Records. The third was labeled simply Audio. "Start with the financials," I said. The folder contained 14 documents, spreadsheets, PDF statements, and what appeared to be internal transfer confirmations. James opened the first spreadsheet, and we both leaned in. It was a ledger of payments made from Callahan Properties' operating account to Donovan Strategic Partners, sorted by date. The oldest entry was dated March 2020. The most recent was November 2024. I counted the rows. 51 separate transactions. The amounts ranged from $18,000 to $94,000 per transfer. I grabbed the legal pad James kept on the table and started adding with the hand that was not pressed flat against the surface to keep it from shaking. "James," I said. My voice came out hollow like a room with all the furniture taken out. "This is over $2 million. 2.3, James said quietly. He had been running the numbers in his head faster than I had. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for exactly 1 second before looking back at the screen. "Robert, this is not irregular accounting. This is systematic asset diversion. If these records are authentic, they're authentic," I said. My jaw was so tight I could feel the tension in my back teeth. "I recognized the transfer format. That's the same system our CFO uses. I know what those confirmation numbers look like." James opened the calendar records next. 52 entries over 4 years, each one marked RD Strategy Session, or RD Site Review, or RD Memphis Consultation. All off-site, all on Maggie's private calendar, one every 3 to 4 weeks without exception, running from January 2021 through December 2024. My chest tightened so severely that I had to push my chair back from the table and breathe deliberately, the way a doctor had once told me to breathe after a stress test came back with numbers he didn't like. In through the nose, 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. She met him every month, I said, for 4 years, while I was living in that house, while I was sitting across from her at dinner and asking how her week went. "Robert, open the audio file," I said. James looked at me carefully. "Are you sure you want to?" "Open it," I said. My voice was not loud. It was the opposite of loud, stripped down to something flat and absolute. "Please." James clicked on the audio file. It opened in a media player. The timestamp showed 11 minutes and 47 seconds. James hit play. The recording quality was clear, not perfect, but clear enough. There was background noise, the soft ambient sound of an office, the distant click of a keyboard. Then Maggie's voice close to the microphone, speaking in a tone I had not heard from her in years. Comfortable, amused, entirely unguarded. "He went to the attorney's good. Let him." No judge in Tennessee is going to look at a 65-year-old man who hasn't drawn a salary in 20 years and decide he built anything. A second voicemail, lower partially obscured, said something I couldn't fully make out. Maggie laughed. The sound of it hit me somewhere behind the sternum like something blunt and heavy. It was her real laugh, the one she used when she felt completely safe. "Richard, I'm serious. He can bring whatever he wants into that courtroom. Documents, paperwork, 30-year-old receipts, it doesn't matter. He is a useless old man who rode my coattails for 2 decades, and now he thinks he's entitled to half of what I built. A judge will see exactly what he is the moment he walks through that door." James stopped the playback. The room felt very still. Not quiet, the building had its normal sounds. The hum of the HVAC traffic on Church Street 7 floors below. But still the way a room goes, still, when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. My eyes were burning. I pressed the back of my wrist hard against my mouth and held it there for a moment. My whole chest felt like it had been compressed inward, like something had grabbed my ribs from the outside and was squeezing. Slowly, methodically. A useless old man who rode my coattails. 35 years. The loan I had signed alone. The nights I had worked until 2 in the morning because I believed in something we were building together. Nathan at age 7 with a fever of 103, and I had called into a client meeting from the hospital waiting room because the contract couldn't wait. I had done all of it, every exhausting, unglamorous piece of it, and she had been in an office somewhere laughing about it with the man she was paying with our company's money. "Robert," James's voice was careful and deliberate. "I need you to hear me right now." I lowered my wrist from my mouth. My eyes were wet, and I did not bother pretending otherwise. "I'm listening." This recording, combined with the financial documents and the calendar records, and combined with what you brought me from your basement, the articles of incorporation, the loan guarantee, and that handwritten letter. This is a complete evidentiary package. He leaned forward, his forearms on the table. "She handed us the case. I need you to understand that. Whatever she thinks of you, whatever she said in that recording, she handed us everything we need." I exhaled, long and uneven. "Tyler took a risk giving us this." "He did," James agreed. "I'm going to need to speak with him directly. Can you arrange that?" "I'll reach out today." I pulled out my phone. My hands were not entirely steady, but they were steady enough. "James, who is Richard Donovan, beyond the company name. I had Carol start digging this morning." James closed the laptop. "He runs a mid-size commercial development firm in Memphis. Good reputation publicly. But Carol found 3 LLCs registered in Delaware with no clear business activity, all of them with Donovan listed as a managing member, all of them opened within the last 5 years." He paused. "She's not done yet. But what she's found so far suggests that at least some of the money moving out of Callahan Properties didn't stay in Donovan's strategic partners. It moved again." The word came out of me before I could stop it. "Where?" "That's what she's still trying to determine." James stood. "Go home, Robert. Write down everything you remember about any interaction you had with Richard Donovan's name. Any conversation, any document, anything at all. I'll call you tonight." I drove home with the Nashville afternoon coming through the windshield in long, flat angles of light. My chest still ached, my eyes were still raw, but underneath the pain, underneath the slow-burning fury that I was only barely keeping below the surface, something new was forming, something hard and clear and purposeful. She had called me useless. She had laughed about it. I planned to let a judge decide that. 3 days after I walked out of James's office with Maggie's voice still ringing in my ears, Tyler Brooks stopped answering his phone. It started on a Thursday. I had texted him in the morning a simple message asking if he was available to speak with James directly, as we had discussed. The message delivered. No reply. I waited until afternoon and called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Tyler's voice on the recording was professional and brief. You've reached Tyler Brooks. Please leave a message. I left one. I told him James needed to speak with him before the end of the week and asked him to call back at his earliest convenience. He did not call back. By Friday morning, the number was going straight to voicemail without ringing. I stood in my kitchen with the phone to my ear, listening to that recorded voice, and felt something cold move through me, from my stomach upward, slow and deliberate, like ice water finding its way through every available channel. I called James. He's not responding, I said the moment James picked up. Since yesterday morning. Phone went to voicemail Thursday, now it's going straight. I don't know if he turned it off or... I stopped, cleared my throat. James, 2 days before the hearing, our only corroborating witness, has gone dark. I know. James's voice was measured, but I could hear something underneath it, a tightness that told me he was not as calm as he sounded. I tried reaching him through the contact information he gave my office yesterday. The email bounced back. The phone number he listed on the witness availability form is the same one you've been calling. Could Maggie have... I stopped again. The thought was ugly, and I did not want to say it plainly. Could she have found out he was cooperating with us? James finished it for me. It's possible. It is absolutely possible. Her attorney is good, Robert. Catherine Moore has been doing this for 20 years, and she has resources. He paused. Or Tyler may have gotten scared on his own, going on record against someone like Maggie Callahan, someone with money, with a legal team, with connections in the Nashville business community. That is a significant decision for a 30-year-old man to make. He gave me a USB drive, I said. My voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I pressed my free hand hard against the kitchen counter to steady myself. He sat across from me in a coffee shop, and he handed me evidence, and he said he told me he was the only one coming to me with the truth. Those were his exact words. And now he's... The USB is still valid evidence, James said quickly. The financial documents, the calendar records, those stand on their own. I can enter them without Tyler present. And the recording? I asked. The audio of Maggie calling me a useless old man without Tyler to testify that he made that recording, without him to establish chain of custody and context. Catherine Moore will argue it's inadmissible. She'll argue it was obtained improperly, that we can't verify its authenticity. My voice was getting rougher with each sentence. James, you know I'm right. A pause. Longer than I wanted it to be. You're not wrong, James said carefully. The audio is stronger with Tyler on the stand. Without him, I can still make arguments for its admissibility. But Moore will fight it hard, and she may win that fight. Judge Williams tends toward caution on audio evidence. Another pause. Robert, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that we go into that courtroom tomorrow without Tyler Brooks. I put the phone down on the counter for a moment. Not to end the call, just because I needed both hands free to press against the edge of the counter to hold on to something solid, while everything in my chest went sideways. The hearing was in 2 days. 2 days. I had spent 6 weeks finding documents in a basement, sitting in attorneys' offices, listening to my own wife's voice on a recording, describe me as dead weight she'd been carrying for 20 years. I had done all of it because I believed we were building towards something. And now the young man who had handed me the single most important piece of that case had vanished like smoke. I picked the phone back up. What do? We go in with what we have, James said. The founding documents, the financial records, the 1994 letter. That is not a weak case, Robert. It is a strong case. Tyler made it stronger, but he did not make it. Do you understand the difference? I understand the difference, I said. My voice was dull and flat. That doesn't make this easier. No, James agreed. It doesn't. His voice gentled just slightly. Go home. Sleep if you can. Be at my office at 7:30 tomorrow morning so we can go through your testimony one more time. And Robert, keep trying Tyler's number. I haven't given up on him showing up. I ended the call and stood in that kitchen for a long time. The house had a particular sound in the evenings now that Maggie was gone. A low settling silence that had nothing to do with peace and everything to do with absence. I had lived in this house for 22 years, and I had never noticed how much of its noise had been her. The television she kept on while she worked. The sound of her heels on the hardwood. The particular way she shut cabinet doors, which was always slightly harder than necessary. I moved to the window. Outside, the late March evening was coming in purple and cold, the last pale light draining out of the sky behind the tree line. My phone rang. I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. Nathan, my heart hammered against my ribs as I answered. Nathan, Dad? His voice was different from the last call, rougher, tighter, stripped of that careful, rehearsed quality. I need to talk to you. Something happened. I found something on Mom's laptop. I was borrowing it to print a document, and I wasn't snooping. Dad, there's an email thread between Mom and her attorney. It goes back 2 years. His breath was uneven. Dad, she was planning this. The divorce, she started planning it in 2023. And there's something in there about me. Something she wrote about me that His voice broke. Completely suddenly, the way a voice breaks when a person has been holding something together for too long and simply cannot anymore. Dad, I think she's been using me. I think I've been God. I've been such an idiot. Nathan. I closed my eyes. My own throat was burning sharp and deep. Come over. Right now. Come to the house. Yeah, he said thickly. Yeah, I'm already in the car. I set the phone down and pressed both hands flat against the windowsill. Outside, the last light had gone completely. The yard was dark. The trial was in 2 days, and Tyler Brooks was gone, but Nathan Callahan, my son, was on his way home for the first time in weeks, and his voice on that phone had sounded nothing like the man who had told me to sign those papers. It had sounded like the boy I raised. He arrived 20 minutes after he called, long enough for me to put a pot of coffee on and stand at the front window watching the dark street, my arms crossed over my chest, my breath coming and going in careful, deliberate measures. When Nathan's headlights swept across the front of the house, something in me moved that I had not expected. Not relief exactly, too complicated for relief. More like the particular ache of watching something you love come back to you damaged, knowing the damage happened on your watch, even if you couldn't have stopped it. He came through the front door without knocking. He still had his key. He looked like he had been crying in the car. His eyes were red-rimmed and raw, his jaw set with the rigid effort of a man who had stopped crying 10 minutes ago and was holding the line by sheer willpower. He was wearing his work clothes, still a button-down, with the top button undone, and the tie pulled loose like he had come straight from the office before any of this happened, and then the world had dropped out from under him. "Dad," he said, and his voice broke on the single syllable. "Come in," I said. "Sit down." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had done homework in 6th grade, the same table where Maggie and I had told him his grandfather had died, the same table where 30 years of ordinary life had happened. I set a mug of coffee in front of him and sat across from him and waited. He pulled his phone out of his jacket pocket and set it on the table face up. On the screen was a screenshot, an email thread, the header clearly visible, from Margaret Callahan to Catherine L. Moore. Date November 14th, 2023. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, Nathan said. His voice was stripped raw like skin after a burn. I was at the house picking up some documents Amber needed for the accountant. I wasn't looking for anything. I was trying to print something, and I needed to email it to myself, and she was logged in, and He stopped, pressed his thumb and forefinger hard against the bridge of his nose. I saw my name in the subject line. Who doesn't open an email with their own name in the subject line? What did it say? I asked. I kept my voice quiet and even. My hands were wrapped around my own mug and I was holding it tightly enough that the warmth was almost painful against my palms. Nathan picked up the phone and read aloud, his voice cracking at the edges. Catherine, as discussed, Nathan will be the most effective public face for our position. His support gives the narrative credibility that I alone cannot provide. He is emotionally invested enough to be persuasive and not analytical enough to question what I tell him. Use him where you can, M. He set the phone down and pressed both fists against the table, knuckles down, and his shoulders dropped forward like someone had cut the strings holding them up. Not analytical enough to question what I tell him, he repeated. His voice had gone low and scraped out. She wrote that about me, her own son. Nathan, I told you to sign those papers, Dad. He looked up at me and his eyes were wet, actively, unapologetically wet, the tears sitting on his lower lids and threatening to spill. I called you, and I told you to walk away and give her everything, and I did it because she asked me to, and I thought I actually believed she was telling me the truth. I thought she was protecting the family. He laughed short and hollow, the kind of laugh that has nothing to do with anything being funny. I was her best card. That's what she wrote. Our best card. Something in my chest cracked open at that, not for myself, but for him. For the boy who had driven an hour in the dark after finding out his mother had calculated his loyalty like a balance sheet. My eyes went hot and sharp, and I did not look away from him because he needed me to hold steady right now, not fall apart alongside him. Look at me, I said. He raised his head. What she did to you is not your fault, I said. My voice was rough, but it held. You trusted your mother. That is not a character flaw, Nathan. That is what children do. That is what they're supposed to do. I'm 35 years old, Dad. I'm not a child. You are her child, I said. That doesn't have an age limit. I reached across the table and put my hand over his fist, and I felt his hand shake under mine, a fine, constant tremor, the physical manifestation of everything he was trying to hold back. She used you. That is her crime, not your failure. Do you understand the difference? He exhaled a long, jagged breath that shuddered all the way through him. 2 tears broke over his lower lids and ran down his face, and he did not wipe them, just let them go while he stared at the table. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for the phone call, for telling you to sign, for taking her side before I knew. Stop, I said. I already forgave you. The moment I heard your voice on the phone tonight, I had already forgiven you. That's done. He made a sound, half breath, half something that had no name, and pressed his free hand hard over his mouth. His shoulders shook once, twice. I kept my hand over his and let him work through it, because some things can't be talked around, they can only be moved through. After a long moment, he straightened, wiped his face with the back of his hand, took a long pull of the coffee I had set in front of him. What do you need from me? He said. His voice was still rough, but his eyes had steadied. For tomorrow. What can I do? The email, I said. Can you send that screenshot to James Hartwell tonight? Already did it in the car on the way over, Nathan said. He met my eyes. I'm going to be there tomorrow, Dad, in that courtroom. I don't care what Mom says about it or what Catherine Moore tries to do with it. I am going to be in that room. My throat tightened so hard I could barely get the next words out. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Nathan said. His jaw was set now, firm and resolved, the shaken man from 5 minutes ago replaced by something steadier and more deliberate. I want to. He paused. Amber wants to come too. She said she has something she needs to say. I don't know exactly what she wouldn't tell me the details, but she was very clear that she needed to be there. I looked at him across the table, my son, 35 years old, red-eyed and steady, sitting in the kitchen where he had done his homework, and felt something move through my chest that I had not felt in 6 weeks. Something that felt unmistakably like I was not alone. "Tell Amber to come," I said. "Tell her to come and to bring whatever she has." Nathan nodded. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, and for the first time since he had walked through that door, something almost like relief moved across his face. Not ease, not the absence of pain, but the particular look of a man who has made a decision and knows it is the right one. Outside, the March wind picked up against the kitchen window. Tomorrow morning, Davidson County Courthouse. Whatever walked through those doors with us, I was not walking through them alone. James had told me to be at his office by 7:30. I was there at 7. Donna, his assistant, handed me a cup of coffee the moment I stepped off the elevator without me asking for one, which meant James had warned her I would need it. The conference room was already set up, documents organized in labeled folders along the table, a laptop open at James's chair, a legal pad with handwritten notes running down both sides of the page. James himself was standing at the window with his own coffee, looking out at the downtown Nashville skyline in the early gray light of a morning that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. He turned when I came in. "How are you holding up?" "I slept about 3 hours," I said. "But I'm here." "Nathan sent me the screenshot last night," James said. He moved to the table and picked up a folder. "I've had it printed and authenticated as a digital copy. It goes in as supplemental evidence. I'll move to admit it during the morning session." He set the folder down and looked at me directly. "Robert, I want to talk to you about something before we get in there." "Say it." "Tyler Brooks has not made contact." His voice was level and deliberate. "As of 6:45 this morning, his phone is still going to voicemail, and the email address is still bouncing. We are going into that courtroom without him." He paused. "I need you to be prepared for Catherine Moore to come at you hard on the audio recording. She will argue chain of custody. She will argue authenticity. She will argue the recording was obtained in a manner that violates Tennessee wiretapping statutes." "Can she win that argument?" I asked. "She has a reasonable chance if Tyler is not there to testify to how the recording was made." James's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm going to fight it, but I want you to understand the landscape before we walk in." I nodded. My chest felt like it had been filled with concrete overnight, heavy and immovable, but my hands were steady. "What do you need from me on the stand?" "The truth," James said simply. "Every question I ask you, answer it completely and honestly, and don't elaborate beyond the question. When Catherine Moore cross-examines you, stay calm, stay factual, and if you don't know the answer, say you don't know. Don't guess, don't speculate, and don't let her make you angry." He pointed at me once with 2 fingers. "That last one is important. She is going to try to make you angry, Robert. She's going to characterize your contributions as minor. She's going to minimize your role. She's going to suggest you stepped back because you had nothing meaningful to offer. You are going to sit in that chair and you are going to answer her questions with the patience of a man who knows exactly what the truth is and isn't afraid of it." "I can do that," I said. The concrete in my chest had not lightened, but something inside it had hardened into something useful. Davidson County Courthouse was 12 minutes from James's office. We walked in through the main entrance at 5 minutes to 9, and I felt the building. The way you feel any room that is designed to determine outcomes, its particular weight, its particular gravity. The marble floors, the high ceilings, the institutional quiet of a space where serious things happen, and the proceedings are recorded for the permanent record. Maggie was already seated at the respondents' table when we came through the courtroom doors. I had not seen her in person since the day I had come home from James's office to find her moving the last of her things out of the bedroom. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and had her hair pulled back in the precise, composed style she wore for board meetings and client presentations. She looked from across the room exactly like the CEO of a successful Nashville commercial real estate firm. She looked like a woman who was completely in control of the situation. She glanced up when I came in. Her expression did not change. Not a flicker, not recognition, not discomfort, not anything. She simply looked and then looked away, back to something she was reviewing with Catherine Moore at her side. My jaw tightened. I breathed through it and sat down. Judge Patricia Williams entered at 9:03, a woman in her late 50s with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been running courtrooms for a long time and had no patience for theater. "We're here in the matter of Callahan versus Callahan," she said, settling into her chair and opening the case file. "Petition for dissolution of marriage filed by the respondent Margaret Callahan, case number 2025 D471. Counsel, are we ready to proceed?" "Ready for the petitioner, Your Honor," James said. "Ready for the respondent, Your Honor," Catherine Moore said. She was tall and precise with a measured voice that gave nothing away. The kind of voice built over years of courtroom practice, stripped of anything that could be read as weakness. James opened with the founding documents. He walked Judge Williams through the Articles of Incorporation from October 1990, the Personal Guarantee Loan Agreement from February 1991, and the growth timeline of Callahan Properties from its founding through 2010. He was methodical and clear, and as he spoke, I watched the judge read along in her copy of each document, her face giving away nothing, her pen making small notations. Then he presented Maggie's handwritten letter from 1994. "Your Honor," James said, "I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 7, a handwritten letter dated March 12, 1994, authored by the respondent and addressed to the petitioner. In it, the respondent explicitly states, and I quote, 'None of this exists without you. Not the company, not the life we're building, not any of it.'" He set the exhibit down. This letter, authored in the respondent's own hand, at a time when she had no legal motivation to misrepresent her husband's contributions, directly contradicts the central claim of the respondent's petition, namely that Robert Callahan played no material role in building Callahan Properties. Catherine Moore was on her feet before James finished his sentence. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is characterizing the content of a personal letter written 30 years ago as a definitive legal admission regarding asset ownership. A private letter expressing emotional sentiment between spouses has no bearing on the legal question of material contribution." "Your Honor," James replied, his voice steady and unhurried, "the letter is relevant not as a legal contract but as direct testimonial evidence of the respondent's own stated belief at the time that the company's existence was contingent on the petitioner's contribution. Its authenticity is verifiable and uncontested." Judge Williams looked at the letter over the top of her reading glasses. "I'll allow it. Objection overruled. Continue, Mr. Hartwell." My heart was beating fast and measured, not panicked, but present, every beat deliberate. James glanced at me once across the room and gave the smallest nod. I straightened in my chair. Then his phone, face down on the table, lit up with a text notification. He glanced at it. Something shifted in his expression just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, before his face went professionally neutral again. He did not show me the screen, but he reached into his breast pocket and pressed something. His pen, or so it appeared, and then he turned back to his documents without breaking stride. Under the table, my hands pressed flat against my thighs. Whatever that message said, it had changed something. I could feel it the way you feel a change in barometric pressure, not yet visible but absolutely present. Something was coming, and James knew what it was. The text message on James's phone had come in at 9:47. I know because I checked my own watch the moment I saw his expression shift, that fraction of a second crack in his professional composure. that told me something had changed in the room without anyone else noticing it. He leaned toward me close enough that his voice did not carry past my ear. "Tyler Brooks is in the hallway," he said. "He arrived 4 minutes ago." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my throat. I pressed my hand flat against the table to keep from reacting visibly. He came, James confirmed. He was already turning back toward Judge Williams. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. The petitioner requests a brief recess no more than 15 minutes, as a material witness has just become available, and I would like to arrange for their testimony this morning." Catherine Moore was on her feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel had ample opportunity to disclose witnesses prior to today's proceedings. A last-minute witness introduction mid-session is procedurally irregular and prejudicial to the respondent." Judge Williams looked at James over her reading glasses with the expression of a woman who had heard every variety of courtroom maneuvering and was not impressed by any of it. "Mr. Hartwell, was this witness previously disclosed?" "Your Honor, this witness was listed as a potential witness in our pretrial disclosure and subsequently became unavailable. He has now made himself available voluntarily, and his testimony is directly material to the financial evidence already entered this morning." James's voice was steady as poured concrete. "I would submit that the court's interest in a complete factual record outweighs the procedural inconvenience." The judge studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Catherine Moore. Then she set her pen down. "I'll allow a 20-minute recess. When we reconvene, Mr. Hartwell, your witness had better be worth the time." "He will be, Your Honor." The moment the gavel came down, I was on my feet. James caught my arm before I could move toward the doors. "Let me go to him first," he said quietly. "Give me 5 minutes with him alone before you see him. I need to know what he's prepared to say." Those 5 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat at the petitioner's table with Nathan beside me. He had come in during the recess and taken a seat in the gallery, and now he had moved to the chair next to mine, close enough that his shoulder pressed against my arm, which was more comfort than I had words for. Across the room I could see Catherine Moore in rapid, low conversation with Maggie. Maggie's face was controlled professionally, deliberately controlled, but her hands on the table in front of her were pressed flat and very still, the stillness of a person who is working extremely hard not to show what is happening beneath the surface. Then James came back through the doors, and beside him, walking with the measured pace of a man who had made a decision and was living with it, was Tyler Brooks. He looked thinner than he had at the coffee shop. There were shadows under his eyes that had not been there 2 weeks ago, and his jaw was set with the particular tension of someone who has spent days preparing for something they are frightened of. But he walked straight. He did not look at Maggie when he came in, though I watched his chin lift slightly as he passed the respondent's table, a small, deliberate refusal to flinch. Before Tyler took the stand, James called one more witness. The petitioner calls Amber Callahan. Amber came through the gallery doors looking like she had not slept in 2 days, which I suspected was accurate. She was pale, and her hands were gripping the strap of her purse so tightly the knuckles had gone white. When she took the oath and sat in the witness chair, she looked once at Nathan in the gallery. He gave her a single nod, steady, deliberate, and something in her face solidified. "Mrs. Callahan," James began, his voice even and unhurried. "Can you describe your relationship with the respondent, Margaret Callahan?" "She's my mother-in-law," Amber said. Her voice was thin but clear. "We've been close, or I thought we were close. In the past 18 months, did the respondent make any requests of you that you would describe as inappropriate?" Amber exhaled. Her eyes went glassy, but she blinked hard and kept her chin level. "Yes. In September of 2023, Maggie called me. She said she needed me to stay quiet about certain things I had seen or heard regarding the company finances. She said if I kept quiet, and supported her publicly. If anyone asked, she would put a condominium in Nashville in my name. And she would guarantee Nathan a senior partnership position in the restructured firm after the divorce was finalized. Her voice cracked on the last 3 words. She said if I told Robert or anyone else, she would make sure Nathan never worked in Nashville real estate again. Those were her words. She threatened your husband's career, James said. Yes. Amber pressed her lips together hard. Her eyes were wet now, the tears held back by sheer will. I was scared. I have a son who is 4 years old. I thought I was protecting my family. She looked directly at me for the first time, straight across the room, her gaze meeting mine with something raw and desperate in it. Robert, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. My throat closed so completely I could not have spoken if I tried. I gave her the only thing I could, a single nod, slow and deliberate. James turned to the judge. Your Honor, the petitioner moves to admit the testimony of Amber Callahan as evidence of witness intimidation and as corroboration of a pattern of coercive behavior by the respondent. Catherine Moore objected. The judge overruled it. And then James turned toward the doors and said the words I had spent 3 weeks waiting to hear. The petitioner calls Tyler Brooks. At the respondent's table for the first time all morning, Maggie Callahan's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Her jaw tightened and one hand came up from the table surface, not dramatic, not theatrical. Just the involuntary movement of a person whose carefully constructed world has just developed its first visible fracture. Tyler Brooks took the oath with his right hand raised and his voice steady. The particular steadiness of a young man who is frightened and has decided to do the frightening thing anyway. James started cleanly. Mr. Brooks, can you describe your professional relationship with the respondent? I was her executive assistant at Callahan Properties from January 2022 to November 2024, Tyler said. I managed her schedule, her correspondence, her travel, and I was present for a significant portion of her internal and external communications. Did you become aware of a relationship between the respondent and a man named Richard Donovan? Yes. He was on her private calendar at least once a month throughout my entire time at the company. Always off-site, always in the evening, always listed as client entertainment or strategy consultation. Tyler's jaw tightened. They were not business meetings. I became certain of that in March of 2023 when I accidentally received an email chain intended for Maggie's personal account. The content made the nature of the relationship clear. Did you report it? Tyler exhaled. No. I was 28, and she was my employer. I made a decision I am not proud of. His eyes moved briefly, just for 1 second, to me, then back to James. I am not keeping quiet now. James pulled up the financial documents on the courtroom screen. Exhibit 1451 wire transfers from Callahan Properties to Donovan Strategic Partners, totaling $2,340,000 over 4 years. Mr. Brooks, in early 2024, I personally processed 2 of those transfers, $62,000 and $78,000. When I asked to see the deliverables from Donovan Strategic Partners, Maggie told me the files were confidential and above my access level. He leaned forward. That was the first time in 2 years she had ever said that to me. At the respondent's table, Maggie's face was a mask, rigid, perfect, the face of someone who has decided expression is her last line of defense. Then James said, Your Honor, the petitioner has one additional witness, a voluntary witness who came forward within the last 48 hours. Catherine Moore rose immediately. Your Honor, this is entirely improper. I reviewed the affidavit during recess, Judge Williams said, removing her reading glasses completely. I will allow it. Bailiff, bring in the witness. The doors opened. Richard Donovan walked in wearing a charcoal suit and the flat, careful expression of a man who has calculated his options and chosen the one that serves him best. He did not look at Maggie as he took the oath. She looked at him, and for exactly 1 second, something sharp and furious broke through her careful mask before she locked it back down. Mr. Donovan, can you describe your relationship with the respondent? We had a personal relationship beginning in fall of 2020, continuing until approximately 6 months ago. He paused. Donovan's strategic partners received payments from Callahan Properties during that period. A portion represented genuine consulting work. A portion represented personal transfers at Maggie's direction, routed through my firm to avoid direct documentation. A sharp intake of breath came from the respondent's table. Small, involuntary, the sound of something carefully constructed coming apart in public. Mr. Donovan, James said, I'm going to play an audio recording. Please confirm whether you recognize the voices. He pressed play. No judge in Tennessee is going to look at a 65-year-old man who hasn't drawn a salary in 20 years and decide he built anything. He is a useless old man who rode my coattails for 2 decades. The silence after it was absolute. Do you recognize those voices? Yes, Richard said. That is Maggie Callahan's voice and mine. August 2024, her office. Tyler Brooks was present, asked to take notes during what Maggie called an internal strategy session. I did not realize he was also recording. I pressed both hands flat against my thighs. My eyes burned sharp and hot, the burn of 35 years of patience finally arriving at the moment it had been building toward. Across the room, Maggie stared at the front wall with the expression of a woman standing in the wreckage of something she had built very carefully for a very long time. James turned to Judge Williams. Your Honor, the petitioner rests. Catherine Moore gave her closing argument for 41 minutes. I know, because I counted the way a man counts his own breathing when he is trying very hard not to let anything show on his face. She was good. Precise, composed, working with what she had, which after Richard Donovan's testimony, the audio recording Amber's tearful account, and Tyler's 40 minutes on the stand, was considerably less than what she had walked in with that morning. She argued Robert Callahan had voluntarily stepped back from management for a decade. She argued Maggie's contributions were documented and primary. She argued the financial transfers to Donovan's strategic partners were a matter for separate civil proceedings entirely. She was building the best possible structure out of damaged materials. She knew it. Judge Williams knew it. And I suspect Catherine Moore knew that we all knew it. When she finished, Judge Williams removed her reading glasses, set them on the bench, and looked at the room in a way that made every person present sit slightly straighter. I want to address both parties directly before I render my findings, she said. Her voice was measured and deliberate, the voice of someone who selects every word the way an engineer selects load-bearing materials. She looked at Maggie first. Mrs. Callahan, your contributions to this company's growth are real and documented. This court does not dispute that your leadership drove its expansion or that your business relationships were central to its success. Maggie's shoulders dropped by a fraction. Beside her, Catherine Moore's pen hovered over her legal pad. However, Judge Williams continued, and that single word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. This court has before it the original Articles of Incorporation signed by Robert Callahan as sole organizer in October of 1990. A personal guarantee loan agreement bearing only his signature, obligating him personally for $200,000 when the company had nothing to fall back on. A letter authored by you, Mrs. Callahan, in 1994, stating explicitly that this company would not exist without your husband. She paused. And audio evidence authenticated in open court, in which you describe your husband as, quote, a useless old man who rode your coattails for 2 decades. The courtroom went completely still. Someone in the gallery drew a sharp breath. I kept my eyes on Judge Williams and did not look away. The disparity between what you wrote in 1994 and what you said in 2024 is not a minor inconsistency, she said. It is a fundamental contradiction. Based on the totality of evidence, I find that Robert Callahan's contributions were material substantial and have been systematically mischaracterized. She set her pen down. Callahan Properties constitutes marital property subject to equitable distribution. The court orders a formal forensic accounting within 90 days and an interim injunction preventing any transfer or sale of company assets. These proceedings are adjourned. The gavel came down. The sound went through me like a current, deep and complete, traveling from my chest to the ends of my fingers. James's hand landed on my shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "You held on long enough. That's all it ever takes." From the gallery, I heard Nathan, not words, just a sound. The particular sound a grown man makes when something breaks open that he has been holding shut for too long. Across the room, Maggie was already on her feet, her back to me, speaking rapidly to Catherine Moore. She did not turn around. I did not need her to. I stood up on legs that were not entirely steady, straightened my jacket, and picked up the folder of certified documents that had started their life in a $65 filing cabinet in my basement. And I walked out of that courtroom with my head up. 3 weeks after Judge Williams adjourned those proceedings, the cherry trees along the Shelby Bottoms Greenway were blooming, and I was walking under them on a Tuesday morning in mid-April with my hands in my jacket pockets and absolutely nowhere to be. I had forgotten what that felt like. Maggie had never liked walking for the sake of walking. She called it inefficient. I had agreed with her quietly, the way I had quietly agreed with a great many things over 35 years, and I had simply stopped doing it. Standing under those pale pink blossoms, watching them spiral down around my shoes in the early breeze, I understood that I had given up far more than I ever noticed, one small thing at a time. So gradually, I had never felt the loss until it was complete. My phone rang. I smiled before I even answered it. "Nathan, Dad." His voice was warm and unhurried, the voice of a man who had put something down that had been too heavy for too long. "How's the walk? How did you know I was walking? Amber drove past the greenway and saw you. She said you looked like you were actually breathing." He laughed clear and unguarded. "She said it was a good sign. Tell her she's not wrong." A brief pause. Then his voice came back quieter. "Dad, I need you to actually hear this. Not just tell me it's fine." He exhaled. "I failed you. When you needed me most, I told you to give up. I took her word without asking a single hard question, and I have to live with that. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." My throat tightened. I stopped walking. "Nathan," I said, when I trusted my voice, "in 35 years of being your father, the only thing I have ever needed from you is exactly what you're doing right now. You saw the truth when it became visible, and you chose it. That is enough. That will always be enough." I heard him exhale, long and unsteady, the breath of a man releasing something he had carried for weeks. "Come for dinner Sunday," I said. "Bring Amber. Bring my grandson. I'll cook something that isn't a sandwich." He laughed, wet at the edges. "Yeah, we'll be there." I ended the call and stood under the cherry tree for one more moment. Then I called Tyler Brooks. "You came when it counted," I told him. "That matters more than the timing. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't," he said. "Tyler," I cut him off, not unkindly. "You came. That's the only version of this story I'm interested in living in." He went quiet for just a moment. "I don't think you're done yet, Robert." "No," I said. "I don't think I am either." I slipped the phone into my pocket and started walking again. 65 years old, one bad knee. A company still being untangled by accountants in a Nashville office somewhere. And a grandson coming to dinner on Sunday who had his father's eyes and his grandfather's stubborn jaw. Something had been broken open in me over these past months. I was beginning to understand that it was not a wound. It was a door. The cherry blossoms came down around me in the April wind, slow and unhurried. I walked through them with my head up, my hands steady, and my eyes, for the first time in longer than I could honestly remember, completely clear. Whatever came next, I was ready. If there is one thing 65 years on this earth has taught me, it is this: the truth does not need your help to survive. It only needs time. I have seen it proven in a courtroom, in a basement, in a single handwritten letter that a woman wrote 30 years ago and forgot she had written. God has a way of preserving the things that matter. You just have to be willing to go looking for them in the dust. Here is what I wish I had understood sooner. Do not make yourself invisible to the people you love and call it loyalty. Do not step back so quietly that the world forgets you were ever there. Do not sign your name to things and then walk away from the table. I did all of those things, and I called it sacrifice, and it nearly cost me everything. Don't be like me. Stay visible. Stay present. Know your worth before someone else decides it for you. My personal opinion, and I have earned the right to have one, is that a person who truly builds something never needs to erase the people who built it with them. Character is what you say about someone when they are no longer useful to you. Remember that. These are the grandpa stories that nobody puts in the headline, the ones that happen in basements and courtrooms and kitchen tables at midnight. If this family story moved something in you, if you saw a piece of your own life in mine, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment, share this with someone who needs it. And if you believe these grandpa stories and family story deserve to be told, subscribe so the next chapter finds you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you know. A gentle heads up: the stories ahead contain certain fictional elements crafted purely for the purpose of meaningful storytelling and life lessons. If that is not the content you are looking for, no hard feelings, step away and find what serves you best. But if you are staying, I am glad you are here.